Hello and welcome to the Mystic Cast, where you join me, Jack Staff, student of metaphysics and member of the Aetherius Society, the cosmic religion for the Aquarian Age, as we break down the barriers between mysticism, philosophy, metaphysics, mysticism, religion, all of which are really only aspects of the self-same quest for truth. Please note this is an independent program, not produced or fact-checked by the Aetherius Society. Today, our guest is Kevin Knuth. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you, a sympathetic scientist.
Indeed. Well, I want to know what the truth is.
Exactly. So maybe for the listeners that aren't familiar with your work, could you, but related to the UFO, because you have a broad portfolio related to UFOs, could you just introduce yourself a little bit and tell us about your work?
Yeah, certainly. I'm a full professor at the University at Albany in the physics department, and I've been studying UAP since about 2018, very shortly after the ATIP program was revealed by the article in the New York Times. And so after that, I decided that scientists should really get involved in studying this, and that's when I started. I joined UAPX, so I'm at the University at Albany in New York. Me and two of my colleagues, Professor Matthew Shadavis and Professor Cecilia Levy, all work to study UAPs, and we are also teamed up with UAPX, which was formed by Senior Chief Kevin Day and Gary Voorhees, who were both involved in the 2004 Nimitz event. So we've been working with UAPX now for about 4 years, and we had one rather major mission where we took our equipment to Southern California and we monitored the Catalina Channel for 5 days, looking for UAP. And that's basically what we intend to do, and we strive to do. We're right now working on developing better equipment and looking for places to collect data.
Well, that's music to our ears, because people taking this seriously. So this 2018, this article in the New York Times was a real watershed moment in the community. Do you feel more strongly now than you did then, or are you more convinced, or have you still not found any evidence? Where do you stand?
Oh, I'm convinced these objects are real. In some cases they're physical. I've seen now at least 3 or 4 cases where people have aimed LiDAR systems at them, which are laser radar, where you can see the laser beam bouncing off the object. So these are, in some cases, physical objects. It's not clear what they are. And they have very unusual flight characteristics, extremely high speeds and accelerations, and that's been known since the 1950s. So, and measured by radar since the 1950s. So, yeah, they're very strange and they ought to be studied. And the more I learn about air safety and the fact that pilots encounter these, not just military pilots, commercial pilots encounter these objects, commercial pilots who are flying jet airplanes with 250 people in the back. It's a flight safety issue because pilots need to know what's in the air. And if they encounter something that they don't know what it is, that's a potentially dangerous situation. You don't want a pilot overreacting or panicking in some case where they encounter something that they don't understand. And so it's really our job to understand what's in the air. And that's the way I look at it now. It's not so much a matter of proving that they're extraterrestrial or anything like that. It's more trying to understand what they are. What are these things? And they're not all Chinese balloons. It's silly.
So what are your own conclusions? Are they terrestrial or extraterrestrial?
Well, the evidence that I've seen, the most compelling evidence is related to radar evidence of their speeds and accelerations. And these are speeds and accelerations that we can't attain. The highest accelerations that I've estimated from data are about 5,000 Gs. So that's 5,000 times the acceleration of gravity. Daniel Kumbe, Professor Kumbe, who was at the Niels Bohr Institute, he looked at the radar data from the Japanese airline JAL 1628 case from 1986, where they had 40 minutes of radar data. And that object was estimated to accelerate at about 10,000 Gs. So in the case, it's making these jumps from one side of a 747 to another. The pilot of the 747 estimated it to be the size of 3 747s in length. That's about the size of an aircraft carrier. So you've got something the size of an aircraft carrier that's making these maneuvers that involve accelerations up to 10,000 Gs. And from that, you can estimate the maximum speeds. The speeds were getting up to about 250,000 miles an hour. You can get to the moon in less than an hour, in about 50 minutes at 250,000 miles an hour. So, are these human craft? There's no way they're human craft. I can't see. So I don't know what they are. I don't know where they're from. But they're sure interesting.
And that's what really appealed to me about your work. I heard you on a show just doing the presentation, and you were doing the actual maths, which not many people have, really studied, because, we like our scientists to be curious people now, but it seems that many scientists come from a position of, was it a quote that you said, or that trying to disprove something rather than find the evidence why it was not true?
Right. Yeah, they're more eager to prove that something was not interesting than to study these things. I don't understand where that lack of curiosity is coming from. I suspect that it's their responses to even the suggestion that these things are extraterrestrial are really emotionally violent, which suggests that they're afraid. And that's a scary thing. I mean, if there's somebody who can make craft that can accelerate at 10,000 Gs, yeah, they know what they're doing, and they are way beyond us, and that is a scary thing. But you get used to it and deal with it.
Yeah, but especially because you're in the field of physics. When you look back through history, I remember I read that in the 1890s they tried to dissuade people from studying physics because they'd already worked everything out.
Yeah, well, and that keeps happening. Physicists are probably some of the most arrogant people I know. And they think they know everything. And the fact is they don't. And in fact, I sometimes find that surprising, because at the same time, they also know they don't know everything. And so it's a very strange stance to see people take. I know how things work, although I will admit there's a whole bunch of stuff I don't know, which could be really important, but I know how things work, and that's impossible. I mean, that's pretty silly.
I've had conversations with people on the show or even privately, they've been educated above their intelligence. It seems that they use they trot out the arguments, the Big Bang, and the speed of G is a constant, and the speed of light is at the ultimate velocity. But if these crafts are doing feats that are above us, surely their intelligence is greater than ours. They have a greater understanding of the laws of nature. The rules that we base our life on might not be true.
They might not be true. You mentioned two things which are interesting. One is the Big Bang. I was recently reading that there's evidence that the universe is expanding at different speeds in different directions, which is not consistent with the Big Bang. So what's going on there? Clearly, there's something there we don't understand. You mentioned G being a constant. I'm assuming that's like Newton's gravitational constant G. Measurements of G are actually not constant. They oscillate with a period of about 6 years. There's a really nice article in was it Physics Today, I think, where they discuss this. And it's very difficult to measure the Newton's gravitational constant G. And one reason is because it appears that it oscillates and may have something to do with the rotation of the Earth. Nobody knows. So there's really a lot that we don't know.
Yeah. Knowing what we don't know is important. The known unknowns, known knowns and less.
Yeah, there's the unknown unknowns are the worst, but we have known unknowns, and some of these known unknowns are potentially relevant to what we're observing with UAP. We don't have a quantum theory of gravity, and we know quantum mechanics makes a difference. Quantum mechanics makes a huge difference with something like electromagnetism. You learn when you're studying classical electromagnetism using Maxwell's equations that magnetic fields can do no work. Yet, how many of us have ever picked up a paper clip with a magnet? That's work.
Sure.
Except you learn that they do no work in classical electrodynamics. And it's an easy proof to make on the board, really, involving cross products. Um, so why does a magnet pick up a paper clip? Why can a magnetic field do work on a paper clip? Well, that has to do with electron spins, which is a quantum effect. So quantum mechanics, the fact that you have point spins, these little point magnetic dipoles, allows the magnet to pick up a paper clip. And so quantum mechanics makes a difference. And we know that we don't have a quantum theory of gravity. What difference could quantum mechanics make in affecting gravity? We have no idea.
Well,
And we also know that gravity affects time. Gravity and time are related. So we also don't understand quantum mechanics and time very well. There's a lot we don't understand. And I think that it's, having a little bit of humility is a useful thing. You aren't going to discover anything new if you think that you know everything already. That's for sure.
Yes, because as you say, if these crafts can move faster than the speed of light, who says that the speed of light is the ultimate velocity? It's the ultimate velocity that we found. That, that's like saying
theories, it's an ultimate velocity, yeah. But can you do something different? You might not need to move the speed of light. You can get close to the speed of light, and you can use relativistic time dilation or length contraction, depending on how you look at it, to traverse these interstellar distances pretty easily.
So there's
easily, but then becomes an engineering effort where you've got to worry about shielding from flying into, interstellar hydrogen at 90% the speed of light, which is not trivial at all. But it's not possible. And that's the point I'm trying to make.
So Dr. King, he's the founder of the Aetherius Society, the oldest international UFO organization. So he was a yoga master. So he did yoga for 10 years to raise his consciousness to such a level that he was he could pick up the radio wave, pick up the thought waves of people of these higher evolution, because we believe that matter and consciousness and people exist at different frequencies. That's why the UAPs can blink out of in and out of existence. They're just vibrating to a different frequency of existence. So that's why when you go to Venus, you don't see anyone that are on frequency, but at another frequency of vibration, then there are people. So some of these transmissions, they gave us information about how they do things. And they said that you were talking about gravity, and they said it has two poles. And they do something with the poles of gravity. I think they reversed it or move them, and then they can, that's for local travel around the planet. They use a gravity drive. And then for interstellar drive, they use another drive, which I'm not too familiar with. So that's something to think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with all these things, I'm a scientist and I'm skeptical, so I want to see proof. And that's really what we're trying to do with UAPX. We're trying to collect data and collect evidence so that we can understand these objects better.
Yeah. And they also said that I think the speed of mind is the ultimate velocity. It's 4,000 times the speed of light. So speed of mind. And we exist in a sea of mind of consciousness. So there are all these different, there's a lot out there that we don't understand at our level of consciousness. So do people email you a lot of sightings? Are you getting more and more?
I get some sightings emailed to me, and more recently I've had people emailing me with their ideas or theories of how UFOs might fly. So for a while I was getting sightings, and those were kind of sometimes some of the, I have photographs sent to me. Some are interesting. One photograph doesn't tell you a whole lot, unfortunately. You really want multiple photographs from multiple angles, and so you can do triangulation. Otherwise, you can't get sizes and speeds of things. So so analyzing one photograph, you can't tell very much. And the most difficult photographs are the lights in the sky.
Mm.
I've got a number of pictures where you've got a dark sky with a light. Um, and the question is, what is this light in the sky? And all you can really say about that is it's a light in the sky. And I can't begin to tell you what the light's attached to. I can't see it. So you can't infer that at all from just the light. So the photographs that the public typically collects are, I mean, please try to take photographs, but they're not always useful for, scientific analysis. And similarly, the military imagery isn't useful for scientific analysis either, because again, you don't
Really?
have the specifications of the equipment. So we don't know what the equipment can and can't do. We don't know what the failure modes are for the equipment. And so we can't tell if the equipment's working properly. And usually, again, it's usually one image from one camera taken from one angle, which is not very useful.
Is it not together with radar? You think the military stuff will be the most useful?
Well, if you've got all of the data they had, so if you had radar data along with imagery, and you can combine the two, that would be useful. But then again, you also need to know what the specifications are for the equipment, which they won't review because that's classified. So it's really, I think that's one reason it's really important for scientists to go collect data. We're collecting data with our own instruments that we're familiar with, many of which, are bought off the shelf. So it's widely known what the capabilities of the equipment are. And our equipment's calibrated and tested, and that makes a big difference. And so when we actually see something on our cameras, we have some idea what we're looking at, and we know that it's correct.
So have you had sightings with your equipment?
Well, we had our mission to Catalina. We had a few things we recorded. That's all was filmed for a documentary called A Tear in the Sky, so you can watch that and see what we saw. The first object that was, here's a few spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, I apologize, but you don't learn this in the movie actually either. The first object that was seen was a light seen by the team on Catalina Island, and they followed it for some time, and then it just disappeared. And we later determined that that was the space station. So at the time we were using an app that on the phone, a phone app, so that we can identify satellites and space stations. And it turned out that app was not handling daylight savings time properly. So it was off by an hour. And so that's why we didn't realize it was a space station right away. Because according to the app, no, it's not. Nothing's supposed to be up. So we now have a better app, of course. But your first mission, I remember there was a lot of excitement. I mean, I was excited, and you can see this in the movie. There's a lot of excitement, and which is great. And that's what that movie is really good about. That's what's really portrayed in that film, is the excitement that we had in trying to collect our own data. But would and there's a lot of anticipation. Oh, what are we maybe we'll see a UFO, maybe we'll get, good images. And of course there's always that excitement too. But the reality of the situation is your first mission, what you're really going to learn is you're going to learn what not to do, right? You make a million mistakes and you realize that, yeah, we're not going to do this again. We did this really poorly. We can do better here. Excuse me. So you learn how to improve. And, that's what most of science is actually. And the most interesting thing we observed, and there was nobody present physically at the time. Our UFO UAP DAPS, or UFO DAP system was observing the sky and saw a hole in the clouds elliptical hole appeared in the clouds with some white dots in it. And we still don't know what it is. We were able to, the FLIR cameras, our bank of infrared cameras had all been, they ended up unplugged. And I think when the film crew was leaving earlier that night, probably around 10 p.m., and then by 4 a.m., when this hole appeared in the clouds, their batteries had died. So all of our infrared cameras were down. So we only got imagery from one camera, one type of camera. Again, not very useful. And we later were able to get radar data from weather stations nearby, and that radar data indicates that there was something going on there, but it's not clear what it was. So we did see something, but our equipment picked up something, but certainly not an ideal situation.
Well, I think you have them on your side because they want to be seen. I mean, you must have heard many examples of that. They put lights on their ships, so they don't need.
It's very strange. If they
don't need them for flying around space. Don't want to get hit by another ship.
If they are craft, they're not trying to hide.
No.
And especially because some of the lights that these objects exhibit are, hundreds of megawatts of power.
Oh, yeah.
Extremely brilliant lights in some cases. And it's not clear why you would need that, except that I had a good friend, my good friend Dave lives down the street. We were going, he had watched my talk for the Soul Foundation where I talked about, these brilliant lights and the amount of illumination that they provide and how strange it is that it's so much power. And in that talk, I questioned why would you need a light that bright on your craft? And then we were going to see the movie Dune 2, and he said that he'd watched my talk and he had a thought about that. He said, if you have a light that bright on your craft, then nobody can get a good picture of it. And I thought, that's interesting. That means that, it's a way of being seen, but not recorded. So you can't prove to everybody that they're there, right? And that they're real, or get any useful information. And I thought that's a curious thought. Could
all sorts of other technology, not just for, they can be visible to radar. They can make them.
Yeah, that's the low observability is one of the 5, the 5 factors that ATIP identified. Yeah, exactly. They can drop their visibility very easily, but when they want to be visible, their lights are very bright, times so bright that you can't get a good photograph, which is interesting. Skeptics are going to hear that and say, "Oh, now you're trying to explain why there's no good photographs." Well, the reason there's no good photographs is because there's physics involved. There's often, if you don't have a brilliant, if you don't have 100 megawatts of light coming off the thing, these objects are often encased in what look like a plasma sheath. So you've got a plasma around it, which is glowing light, and the infrared, it just makes everything fuzzy. When you look at something like the video of the object flying over Agua de Puerto Rico, flying over the airfield, you can see as it flies over the parking lot, you can see the parking lot lines actually warp nearby, in the visual field and around the object. So these objects are basically bending light near them. There's physics involved as to why you can't get good photographs of these things. And we're working to understand some of that physics too by looking, that's one thing that's useful about seeing photographs that people take. We can start to hypothesize about what are the physical effects that are making these things blurry.
They're called Scout Patrol vessels, the very small, the classic UFO, called by Dr. King. And it takes 20,000 years, apparently, to learn to fly one of those things, to do all those.
I don't have that kind of time.
Well, you get a longer lifespan on the other planets because
right. Good.
At this frequency, at our level of involution, we go through this incarnate because we're more concerned about, because these UFOs have been coming through history. I mean, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the, the Ramayana, I mean, the Star of Bethlehem, UFOs have been coming throughout history. And I mean, the spirituality side of things, we're more interested in the pilots than their craft, because and their teachings, and that's what we study. And so we know not so much about the craft, because they can travel without craft. They only need craft to bring things. They can project from Venus to Mars in seconds. I mean, in less than a fraction of a second. I mean, when they're doing they can project take off their body and like an ovoid shape, and then they can fly, because they're faster for the controls in a non-physical body. So there's this. It's beyond science fiction.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly incredible accounts out there which are really interesting, and they do go. And you're right, they go way back. There are Roman accounts of flying shields, and the Japanese have flying umbrellas, and these things have been seen for throughout human history, really, and I think it's indicative of the. Carl Sagan actually once said that he said that he couldn't believe that you've got an interstellar craft arriving at Earth every other week. So he and he didn't quite take this thought further, and I think that this really is evidence that in some sense they live here, or there is or bases here or something. There's some kind of residence here. And you can tell that because there are, they'll show up at natural disasters or other disasters, such as the Fukushima nuclear power plant in Japan that that then had radiation leakage after the tsunami. UFOs were present the next day. It took them a day to get there. So you either have, you've got light travel time for the information has to go out from Earth that this happened. It would have only been able to go out a half a day, and then the UFOs would have to come in. And if they came at the speed of light, that gives you a 1/2 light day radius around Earth, which there's nothing there except our solar system. So they're clearly coming from within. They're clearly coming from within our solar system, and very probably just are here on Earth. They've been here throughout human history. So whatever these things are, it's high time we figure out what they are. That's the way I look at it.
It's a wonderful attitude to have. Yeah, we understand from our teachings that karma is everything. Karma is how God manifests. The law of karma is everything. So that's why they can't land in Central Park, because that's why they're raising our consciousness gradually, because it would interfere with its karmic interference. And one thing they can do is they're not just flying around to so we can see them. That's one of the main things. But they can also, they became very active after we just probed the atom, and we're exploding bombs left, right, and center. And they can't karmically interfere, but they can, because there's only one energy in the universe. This energy has many octaves of manifestation. They can take this energy, change its frequency, the nuclear radiation, the radioactive, and use it as fuel for their ships. So it's not efficient for them. They don't need to do it, but it's a karmic way that they can take an energy out of manifestation on our frequency, which would hurt us, and use it to help us in an indirect way by using it as fuel for their ships. So, and they also appear around, they have disabled nuclear weapons and things like that. So when there is sometimes they do. I think karma's like you only got so many points. You have to choose your battles. So they can't, because if you go and help your kid with his homework every day, he's never going to graduate. He's never going to understand. He's never going to pass an exam, because I'm sure you've had that argument before. So
you've got to let people learn people have to learn on their own, and the struggle is a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think of, I had the Seth from SETI on, what do you think of the SETI program?
The SETI program? I think what they're doing is worthwhile. I'd like to know who all is out there. And if you can detect radio waves from them, that's great. And so I applaud what they're doing and I support it. I think that the expectation that everybody is going to be using radio waves is a little naive. Are there other ways?
Especially when
to
we've moved
communicate?
on.
Yeah, there are other ways to do it. That's a real question, um, and I think that somebody might not want to just spray radio waves out into space, basically announcing we're here, we're here, we're here. You don't necessarily want anyone to come find you. This is the whole dark forest theory that's related to the three body problem books. And so, um, and I think that there's something to be said for that. It's sometimes good just to be quiet, watch instead of shouting. And we humans are good at shouting. So, well, there it is. We'll see what happens.
And
I think that, yeah. So, I think that the SETI program supports the strange thing about them is I think I mean, SETI has involved, researchers who have looked for artifacts on the moon or in asteroid, proposed to look for artifacts in asteroids and things like this. But then there's this whole taboo about looking for, any alien, anything on Earth. That's not allowed because it's too close to UFOs, right? So they don't want to be too close to UFOs. And I think that part of this is historical. It took SETI decades to gain the kind of approval that they have from the scientific community, which is still not that, solid of approval. And so I think their existence is a bit tenuous and they worry about this a lot, and rightfully so. And getting associated with UFOs or UAPs could only damage that. And I think that that's true to some degree. But I think there's ways to handle it, carefully and scientifically that are more reasonable. And I'm hoping that that'll eventually change. Because it would be a shame if we do discover that some of these UAPs or UFOs are actually alien craft and that discovery is made first before SETI finds anything out there with radio waves, then SETI is going to look really bad. And I don't want that to happen because I support their work. So I wish they'd find a way to better support the, studying potential technosignatures here on Earth. And of course, if you mention this to, a scientist who supports SETI, their first response is, well, I can't get along with this idea that people just jump to the conclusion that this is an alien spacecraft. And I agree with that. I don't believe most UFOs are not alien spacecraft. That's clear. However, the fact does remain that some of these objects move at very, very high speeds. They move at spacecraft speeds. So in some cases, assuming that it's a spacecraft, when you've seen something move at spacecraft speeds is maybe a reasonable assumption. And I think that needs to be acknowledged.
What would you do if you had their funding?
I'm sorry?
What would you do if you had their funding?
Oh, I would have observation sites all over the place, watching 24/7, collecting all the data I could with people hired to analyze that data. And I think that with proper funding, I suspect that that scientific groups could probably figure out what most of these things are within, 10 to 20 years. I think a lot of it could be figured out and solved in 10 to 20 years. But as it stands, you have about 5 or so scientific groups out there trying to collect data, and most of us are very poorly funded, and it's just going to be slow. And we'll just do what we can.
Do you think that, as you can see, your work and your observations have shown that there are extraterrestrial life, surely there should be, because if Japan discovers them first or Russia discovers them first, surely America should be rushing to find them. Doesn't this seem like proof that they already have made contact with?
It's, yeah, these are difficult inferences to make. Governments act very illogically. Any bureaucracy acts very illogically. So it's really difficult to say, well, if this is true, then they would have done this. So
Okay.
for that, I think that's really difficult. I'm not sure what to make of the crash craft alien bodies business. I've heard the same rumors that, David Grush, talked about in the congressional hearings. I've heard from several other physicists who've done work like this, in related work. So so it sounds to me that it's plausible, but I want to see the proof, and I also don't buy Arrow's report that they don't have any evidence, because there is evidence, and I've written a scientific paper about this, and peer-reviewed scientific paper that we published about speeds and accelerations, and Hermann Oberth, who was the father of modern rocketry, he was the mentor for Wernher von Braun. He noted in a 1954 talk that he gave on UFOs that these things have been measured at moving at speeds of 19 kilometers a second. That's about 40,000 miles an hour. In 1954, he knew this, and he said that he had seen over 50 radar tracings of these things, with these speeds. So he believed it, and so it's been known by some since the 1950s that these things move at spacecraft speeds. The space station's going, about 17,000 miles an hour, something like that. So 40,000 miles an hour is much faster. That's closer to the speed of the New Horizons probe that we sent to Pluto. That right now I think is going about 45,000 miles an hour. So it's been known since the 1950s that some UFOs move at spacecraft speeds. And so some people know this, but this information gets compartmentalized, and to say a government knows isn't even really a meaningful statement, because a government isn't a uniform thing. It's multiple agencies that are very often not working together. So it's some agencies probably know some of these things. It's hard to say what's known and what's not.
Even the president can't get full access. So.
Yeah, well, and I think that Congress can get full access. I mean, Congress asked for reports from all of the agencies and didn't get reports from many of them. I don't think the Air Force sent in a report. And Congress demanded it. I mean, this is another problem with our government, is that they don't do what they're supposed to. And then when they do, sometimes they cover things up and lie. So they're not trustworthy. So so as I say, I'm a scientist, I'm skeptical, and I want to see data. I want to see proof. And, while David Grush's testimony was interesting and compelling, it's not proof. And to have the Pentagon come out and say, well, nothing happened at Roswell, that was Project Mogul. Well, let's see the proof. I want to see the proof. I want to see.
Skeptical of that too.
You had how many soldiers showed up on that ranch to collect debris? Where's the requisitions for all these soldiers? What was their mission details? Let's see those. Produce them. There was a C-54 transport plane took debris out from Roswell. Where's the requisition for that plane? They wanted the local mortuary. Got a request from the Air Force Base for 3 small caskets. Let's see the requisition for those. Produce it. Prove that it was Project Mogul. And if you don't produce that, if you just say it was Project Mogul, then I don't believe you. What other things have the Air Force? I mean, the Air Force has been, making up stories about Roswell since 1947. I mean, the first story that came out was produced by the Air Force, by that local Air Force base, Army Air Force base. It was the Air Force wasn't exactly in existence yet. That said they captured a flying disc. That was the first report that was sent, and then it was quashed the next day. And then they said it was a weather balloon. So it's a weather balloon, and then, but in the 1990s, they claimed that it was the saucer-shaped back shell of a Mars lander test. They were testing a Mars lander. Well, wait a minute. Who was testing a Mars lander in 1947, 10 years before we ever launched a satellite? Who was doing that? Nobody. That's ridiculous. That is the most obvious, stupid lie, period. And that claim alone should just make you distrust what the Air Force says. And I've had scientists come to me and said, "Oh, they said they were doing this." And I'm like, you want to slap the scientist upside the head and said, "Where's your skeptical thinking now?" The Pentagon says that there's nothing to see here. When the Pentagon says what you agree with, you stop thinking skeptically. Are you kidding? That's not what science is. That's not how scientists ought to work. I want to see proof. And if they came out tomorrow, if President Biden came out tomorrow and said, "Yeah, we have crash-crafted in aliens," I want to see proof. I won't believe them either saying that I won't believe the Pentagon saying that they're aliens unless I see proof either. I don't trust them. They have lied before. They could very easily do it again.
Yeah. They always have a reason for everything. So yeah.
And I'm a scientist. I want to see evidence.
No, I really admire your attitude and your open-mindedness, and it raises you thinking about everything, because you're saying these craft, these UFOs move at spaceship speeds. We're told in the Theory Society the motherships, that's nothing. The motherships, there isn't enough space in this in this solar system for two motherships to engage in any conflicts, because they're so big and they're so fast. They need more space. So these craft are thousands of miles long.
I would love to see something like that. That would be pretty amazing.
We just see the little ones. I mean, even something three times as big as the Boeing 747 is nothing. I mean, these are the gigantic craft. So,
well, I don't know if it's nothing. That's something. Oh, yeah. And that one, of course, that we only have the pilot's testimony along with the radar data. And you can't totally discount the testimony, because how wrong is somebody going to be when they say it's the size of 3 747s? How off could they be?
When you're in a 747.
When you're in a 747 and you're familiar with seeing 747s outside, and how wrong can you be? Well, even if he's 50% off, right? He's off by or even a factor of 10. So the thing is still pretty big. There is a lot of compelling information out there, and it's not proof, but it at least should compel you to look more, right? Somebody has to look into this, and this is something that needs to be figured out.
Yes, it's testimony, and testimony could put you in prison if somebody testifies against you. So it should be enough to.
And we believe things that people tell us all day long, all day long, and then all of a sudden, when somebody says something a little incredible, then now all of a sudden you can't believe anything they say. That's not logical thinking either.
That's great, Kim, and I really admire your approach. And how can people follow you? And do you give out a newsletter or your website? I've been on as well. How's the best?
I have my website, which I update when I publish papers, but I don't update with other activities. And I'm not really active on social media, so I'm not sure. You can follow UAPX. UAPX sometimes puts out summaries about what we're up to.
Great, because when is your next trip?
Oh God, I don't know. I would love to go me and a colleague of mine went to work with the Tedesco's brothers, who are engineers who were with the Galileo project, but they now have their own project called Nightcrawler, which they have an RV with their own equipment. And they have a book called Nightcrawler on Amazon.com that summarizes what they've been up to. So we went and observed with them for a couple of nights about last March, and didn't see anything interesting. We were observing on the southern beaches of Long Island, so we're watching out over the ocean, and it's March, so it's freezing cold and windy, and you didn't see anything. We had a lot of hot chocolate. It was good. But I would like to try again, when the weather gets a little bit better. Once we get into May, I'd like to try again and go. They've got some videos of things that they've seen, and I would like to record some of with our equipment as well. So that would be great fun.
If you were bird watching and you were out twice, you wouldn't say you were you have to spend hours in a field or on the ocean looking. So
yeah.
Wonderful, Kevin. I really appreciate taking the time to chat to me. And
certainly. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
It's been a real pleasure. And if people or yourself want to learn more about the Aetherius Society, you can go to aetherius.org. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.